All right.
So
Magus Lucea Kane. I love my.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so I am a CDH player, so one of the common things that I will run into, especially with this bottom ability, is Mind Break Trap and Flusterstorm. Now then, to the best of my knowledge, this is a stifleable ability, that second part, that triggered ability tied to the activated ability. How would that actually go onto the stack? Because I've had experienced people say, yeah, it would go on as a triggered ability that's stifleable, yada yada yada.
Sure.
And so so
Yeah.
how would the stack look like? Let's say she was tapped 3 times.
Yeah.
And then I cast the next spell.
So what's happening is every time that you activate her mana ability, although the mana ability is not using the stack, it is creating what's called a delayed trigger. Right, so it kind of creates this thing that waits on the sideline for a specific triggering event to happen. So even if Magus is removed before that delayed triggering event happens, you still get the delayed trigger, right? So it exists now independently. And then the triggering event is, either when you next cast a spell with X in its mana cost or activate an ability with X in its activated cost this turn, copy that spell or ability. So let's say you're casting just a Hydra spell, right? It's an X cost Hydra spell, or whatever.
Finale. Yeah.
There you go.
Finale.
Yeah, you're casting one of your finale spells, no problem. So the spell goes onto the stack, and then before anybody gets priority to do anything, this delayed, all relevant triggers go on the stack, right? So anything that was a cast trigger, or now this delayed trigger that saw you cast this X spell, it doesn't immediately copy it. It puts the delayed trigger onto the stack that says when this trigger resolves, copy that spell. And then it puts that many. So if you've been able to tap her and untap her and tap her again, and you've put like 3 delayed triggers in existence, so you cast the spell, and then all 3 delayed triggers go onto the stack. Now let's for a second, let's look at it if nobody interacts, right? So again, it doesn't immediately copy it 3 times. It puts 3 triggers on the stack to copy the spell, and then the first copy resolves, and you get a copy of the spell, or the first delayed trigger resolves, you get a copy of the spell, and that has to resolve before we resolve the next instance of that delayed trigger, and then we resolve that next delayed trigger, and then a copy of the spell goes on the stack, and we resolve that copy of the spell, and then the last of the delayed triggers resolve and puts the copy of the spell on the stack, we resolve that copy, then we resolve the original. Right, so
cool.
Each of them is a separate delayed
trigger.
Yeah.
All right, cool. That's what I wanted to make certain happen, because a lot of people, whenever I do this, think that it's just, hey, I have 3 finales on the stack. I'm gonna cast Mind Break Trap, exile them all, and I constantly have to explain to people like, no, these are all stifleable abilities. These are, as I flip cards over, these are triggers.
Well,
so
but
you're gonna you can only ever nab 2.
Even if it put those copies on the stack, Mind Break Trap wouldn't interact here because you did not cast those copies. Mind Break Trap is only...
Hold on. That's a new revelation.
Mind Break Trap says if an opponent casts 3 or more spells this turn, you may pay 0. So I mean, you can still cast Mind Break, but you can't do it for 0, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I'm fully aware of that.
Okay.
I'm just saying, in competitive games, people like to have these massive stat clearing spells like Mind Break Trap or Flusterstorm.
Sure.
That would then hit multiple copies of a spell. And so I'm just making sure that not all of these would get caught. They could only nab 2 at a time. Effectively.
Effectively, the original and whatever copy happens to be on the stack at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then the other and here's the cool thing about those other triggers is that let's say that you get that first trigger resolved and you put a copy of the spell on the stack and they go, great, I'm gonna exile all the spells from the stack, right? So they exile the original and they exile the copy that was currently made. Those 2 triggers, even though the original spell is no longer on the stack, they still get to copy it. Right, so
because they saw the initial cast.
Right, so the difference would be like, let's say, if let's say you have an effect that copies a spell, but it targets the spell that it wants to copy, right? Like a dual caster mage or something like that. If the original spell is removed from the stack, then the copy effect with the target doesn't have a legal target anymore. It doesn't get to resolve, just like anything that would have a target that's no longer legal, right? But anything that just refers to the spell without targeting it. So we're looking at like Krark the Thumbless. We're looking at, any storm triggers. We're looking at these delayed triggers here that we're talking about from Magus Lucea Kane. They're just referring to the spell without specifically targeting it. So even if that original spell no longer exists on the stack, the copy effect will use the last known information of how that spell existed on the stack and still gets to copy it.
All right. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
That's
fantastic. That's why
clarification.
That's why Krark Shock Sakashima runs the way that it does, because if you get multiple copies of the Krark trigger, but then like one of them bounces the original spell back to your hand, the other copy effects, if you depending on the coin flip, still get to work, right? Because they're not targeting the original spell; they're just copying what they remember that spell was. Yeah.
Correct. Awesome. Thank you. It's really helpful to have final definitive clarification on this.
Yeah, and I think what the confusion comes from is that a lot of players shortcut, they're like, oh, I'm gonna cast this brain freeze and I have a storm count of 20, so I just get 20 copies on the stack right now. It's like, no, you get brain freeze and you get the storm trigger on the stack. And then when that storm trigger resolves, then you get 20 copies. They shortcut that storm trigger type of thing. And so a lot of players just immediately default to copy effect means get copies on the stack now. Yeah, so that's where the mix-up happens. Yeah. Yeah, what's up?
All right, so I might mess up the card names, but
That's all right. We'll work through it.
all right. So 4 people, one person had an Exquisite Blood out, right?
Yeah. Got it.
Whenever an opponent loses life, you gain life, right?
Okay.
You gain that much life. Okay. He had that out on the board, and another player had played. It was like an X spell. Like each opponent deals, let's say 20 life, right? But let's say the guy with the Exquisite Blood has 20. He's at 20 life, right? But the guy that casted the X spell, he paid 20 into it, dealing 20 to everybody.
Yeah, so the guy with the Exquisite Blood got brought down to 0, and you want to know if that'll save him.
Yes.
Yeah, gotcha. So here's what happens is that when a spell or ability resolves, of course, if there's any relevant triggers, they get to go on the stack, but before those triggers are allowed to go on the stack, the game has to check what's called state-based actions. Are you familiar with this term?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so state-based actions is where the game kind of cleans itself up, right? It just makes sure everything is the way it's supposed to be. It checks the legend rule. It checks for creatures with both a +1/+1 and -1/-1 counter on them, all sorts of stuff, right? And among the things that it checks is it looks for players who would have some sort of a state that makes them lose the game, right? Either they tried to draw from an empty library, or in this case, they are at 0 or less life. So before those Exquisite Blood triggers are even allowed to go onto the stack, much less resolve, that player loses for having 0 life, and they are immediately removed from the game.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't gain that life before he would have lost.
Right. He lost to during state-based actions right after the spell resolved for having 0 or less life. Right.
Okay. So same scenario, right? Let's say that person had 4 creatures and he was swinging out at each opponent and it was enough to deal lethal. Is the same thing applies then? Because let's say he's doing lethal to opponent 1 and 2 and 3, like if they would have lost that much life, would he gain that life in between? Like, how do you?
Well, if he eliminates all of his opponents, it doesn't matter about those triggers because he just wins the game, right?
Well, no, beforehand, you know how? Okay, let's say he swung at one person and he dealt 20 damage to him. He swung 20 at the other person and swung 20 at the guy with the Exquisite Blood. Is it not like a? Everybody died
you're saying the one with the Exquisite Blood got hit with combat damage
damage, right? And the other 2 people got hit with combat damage that was lethal.
Gotcha.
He was trying to swing out for lethal.
Uh-huh.
Will the Exquisite Blood see them dying and give him life as he's losing the life to the creatures.
I gotcha. So here's what happens. Now let's assume that nothing has like first strike or double strike.
Yeah.
All creatures deal their damage at the exact same time during the damage step of combat. So
Right.
what happens is, although the other opponents did lose life, the one with the Exquisite Blood, if the combat damage was enough to bring him down to 0 or less life, again, before any triggers are allowed to go on the stack, the game checks state-based actions and sees him with 0 life and removes him from the game.
Dang. Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my only question. I couldn't. It was hard trying to look that one up.
Yeah. And basically, so the thing to remember is just losing the game for having 0 less life is part of state-based actions, and that happens immediately following whatever just happened and right before triggers would go on the stack and before players would get priority. So, like I said, if they're at 0 or less life, nothing is going to save them except for some sort of effect that says you can't lose the game. But other than that, no, they just lose the game before anything new gets to happen. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right, man. That's all I needed. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. All right, cool. Go ahead. What's up?
This is probably a question. The reason why I joined was because this is probably a question, if you are recording, that a lot of people might actually have questions on.
Yeah, it's one of the things I like doing about this is like it shows people like, hey, you're not the only one with this question. There's other people out there too, instead of just doing scripted stuff. Yeah.
So, Zergo Storm Render Blade of Selves.
Okay, so Zergo, you're talking about the one that was the Tarkir Dragonstorm Mardu commander. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, reason why I'm asking is because I have my own theory. Online has their own theory. And I've also talked to another judge that I do know personally.
Okay.
And they've all given me 3 different answers.
Okay, so you're saying Blade of Selves on Zergo, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So, scenario, Blade of Selves is out.
Yep.
I attach it to Zergo. Zergo's already there, ready to attack. Does not need haste.
Gotcha.
Play Blade of Zeus, attach. You play 2, add for 4, attach.
Yeah.
On the attack, Blade of Zeus triggers, giving Zergo 2 myriad triggers. Or a myriad trigger.
Uh-huh.
Bringing in 2 Zergos, which will die to the legend rule immediately, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I'm assuming you choose to keep the original, you send the tokens to the graveyard.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep. On the stack, will the 2 Zergo tokens die, see each other die, plus the original to draw me 6? Or do I draw 2?
Yeah, gotcha. So here's what happens. When multiple permanents either enter the battlefield at the same time or leave the battlefield at the same time, they see each other for the purpose of any triggers that they may have. So in this instance, you're attacking with your original Zergo. Your myriad trigger gets you 2 token copies of it that come in tapped and attacking your opponents, but that's not going to matter. State-based actions checks the legend rule, says, hey, you've got more than 1 legendary permanent with the same name. Pick 1 to keep, send the rest to the graveyard. You're like, well, I'm going to keep the original. I'm going to send the 2 tokens to the graveyard. They go simultaneously. You're not sending one then the other, right? They're both going to the graveyard. Right, and that's kind of the founding principle here is that both of them are going simultaneously during state-based actions. So because they left and they are tokens, they see themselves, because it doesn't say another token, right? It says a token. So it sees, each of them will see itself, plus the other Zergo leave the other token leave the battlefield at the exact same time. So you have 2 tokens leaving and 1, 2, 3 objects that trigger because of those. And because they were attacking, because they did enter attacking, right? So they are attacking. So each of them will trigger to draw you a card. So you'll get a total of 6 triggers to draw cards. Yes.
Thank you. That's kind of what I wanted to say as well, because that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
My other buddy was also saying that I would only get 2 because state-based actions happen before other effects, and since the other effects
they happen before other triggers, correct?
Yep. But then I think he was missing. Then they just followed the stack because triggers still have to resolve. So I think that's where he was misunderstanding. But I wanted to talk to somebody else to make sure I was understanding that correctly.
Yep, that's that. You got it how it works. Yeah.
Okay, so I've been trying to do this deck for a while, and it's kind of hard. I took apart the precon with Zergo.
We were just talking about that Zergo deck, but yeah, go ahead.
So I just want to confirm. So if I have Neriv on the battlefield with Impact Tremors and Warstorm Surge,
Sure.
and I play something like Red Dragon, right? Or Red Dragon, right? So when it enters the battlefield, Red Dragon deals 4 damage to each opponent, right?
Right. Okay.
So this wouldn't double because it specifically says Impact Tremors deals 1 damage, correct?
Correct. The enchantment Impact Tremors is the one dealing the damage, but Warstorm Surge says that the creature that entered is the one dealing damage equal to its power. So
Right. Okay.
So your Neriv would see that a creature that entered the battlefield this turn is dealing damage and apply its replacement effect to double that damage. Yes.
And then so these two work for the double damage,
Right.
right? But
Yep.
this one does not.
Correct. Right. Okay. What's up? What's the question you got?
Okay, I can't remember the name of the commander. It's a Transformer commander. It's, I believe it's 6 mana that has more than meets the eye for red, black, white, and 1.
Is it Megatron?
Megatron, thank you.
Okay.
So you know his more than meets the eye side's ability of when it attacks, you may sacrifice an artifact. If you do, deal damage equal to its mana value to target creature an opponent controls. Then excess damage is dealt to his creature's controller. Now, I know for a fact that that is an ability and other things. But if you were to give the more than meets the eye Megatron deathtouch, although it's the ability doing damage, it should do the full amount of damage rather than lethal damage, which is 1, because lethal damage is only assigned to blockers when doing combat damage, but this is ability damage.
So Death Touch is not limited to combat damage. Death Touch is any damage from that source with Death Touch is considered lethal damage to creatures.
If
right.
it sends...
So hang on, man, hang on. So like if you have a 10/10 creature and I have a Prodigal Sorcerer that has an activated ability to tap to deal 1 damage to a target. If I give it Death Touch, I can tap it to deal 1 damage to your 10/10, and that's lethal damage, even though it's not combat.
Correct.
Yeah.
But my question is, although it is dealing lethal damage, the ability should do the full amount, which let's say X is 2 for the ability damage for Megatron sacrificing. Would it do the full 2, or would it deal 1 and excess is 1?
Gotcha. Oh yeah, because his ability looks specifically for excess damage, which is Delta. Yeah. So that's the same thing. So lethal damage, excess. Let me rephrase that. Excess damage is anything more than what is considered lethal damage to that creature in that moment. Right. So again, like if you have a 5/5 and I'm dealing 10 damage to it, then there's 5 excess damage, right? If you have a 5/5 that already has 4 damage marked on it, and I deal 5 damage to it, well, you only needed 1 to be lethal, so the rest of it is excess. So same thing with Death Touch. If I have 2 damage that I'm about to deal with Death Touch, 1 of it is necessary to be considered lethal, and the other is excess damage.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the event that if Megatron were to do the ability, the owner is right in saying that it would do 1 for, say, X is 2 for damage, and the additional trampling over would be 1.
It's not trample, but the excess damage, yes, is beyond that 1 Death Touch. Anything extra is excess damage, yes.
Okay, so I was the person who was wrong. Got it.
It's okay. Like I said, there's some nuanced things in this game, and that's why I like doing this lobby to help people with those situations. Yeah.